All right. It started. I did it this week. We'll be good to go then, unless it stops, which I have every right to do. All right. Philip was asked by Jesus to follow him. And immediately after Jesus asking him to follow him, what does Philip do? He follows him. You know, if there's ever any lesson for us, that would be enough, wouldn't it? The example of what to do when Jesus says, "Follow me," to follow. And you know, the following that Jesus requires of us is far above and beyond what the world suggests that it is. But Philip does something even extra, which is helpful for us to understand and encouraging for us to know what to do next as well. Because part of following Jesus is also sharing his story, sharing Jesus with the world, inviting others. You remember when we used to, I assume Thomason Road has done this as well, but I remember growing up, you know, the preacher always used to say things like, make sure to invite your friends. And when I hosted Vacation Bible School a couple years back in Alabama, I would tell all the kids, they called me Sheriff TJ, and I told all the kids, there's one thing that you have to do tomorrow: invite your friends. And I'd have them all repeat it, and then we had this little rooster. We called him Booster the Rooster. I still have them in my office. You can see them one day. Come by and visit me. Booster the Rooster. You know the old Bible school song, Booster, Booster be it? So we named him Booster the Rooster. And whoever had the most friends got to keep Booster the Rooster for the day, for that day of Vacation Bible School. But, preachers, what they would say, did you invite your friend? Stand up today if you invited a friend. They'd tell you that, right? And you took great pride, and it was encouraging to know that you had the opportunity to invite your friends to hear about Jesus. And that's what Philip does. He invites Nathanael. I told you that John's an interesting book, right? Fabulous, very intricate, a lot of depth. If you remember, it's at the end of John where one of the apostles is told that Jesus has risen from the dead. A lot of times we preface his name by calling him Doubting. You know who I'm talking about? Thomas. You remember his response? Unless I see and can put my fingers in the holes of his. It's interesting, John begins following Jesus with a similar controversy by another disciple, Nathanael. We talked about him a little bit last week, right? Nathanael's response to Philip saying, "Hey, we found the one of whom Moses and the prophets spoke about." Nathanael's response was, "Can anything good come from Nazareth?" And so Philip does exactly what we were encouraged to do last week. And he repeats the same words that Jesus uses with his disciples. Come and see. So Nathanael does this very thing. As Nathanael comes up, it's such a Jesus thing to do. When I came for my interview, I met Steve Wakefield. And Steve, you remember this? I said, "Hey, I'm Steve," and he said, "Oh," I said, "I'm Todd." He said, "I'm Steve." He said, "Look, if you'll really get my wife if you say, 'Good to meet you, Claire,' and don't tell her that you know her name. Just say, 'Hey, hey Claire,' and then say with a K. And so I did. And of course, she looked at me like, yeah, next, let's get the next person. At first, she thought I was one of the students or a former student or something like that. But anyways, it was funny for me, and then it was really awkward, and then I got really hot, and then it's But Jesus kind of does this with Nathanael, doesn't he? As if they've met before. He did it with Peter too. Hey, here is an Israelite in whom there is no deceit. He already knew who he was. Such a Jesus thing to do. But there's more depth to it than just Jesus knowing who Nathanael was. You see, him saying this is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit is actually Jesus pointing back to the Old Testament. Someone from Israel, from the nation of Israel. There was a man named Israel from whom the nation comes. But before his name was Israel, his name was Jacob, which means deceitful. And Jesus is saying, I'm making a contrast to this person who is of that remnant that the prophets spoke about, one who is coming in whom there is no deceit. Now Nathanael's ears are perked up. How do you know me? Oh, this is so cool. This is so cool. How do you know me? And Jesus says, before Philip called you, I saw you sitting under a fig tree. Now, to us, it's kind of like, okay, so Jesus must have been looking off. He saw Nathanael under the fig tree, but it had to be bigger than that because Nathanael immediately responds to this. I saw you sitting under a fig tree. Now, how many of you, if Jesus just says, okay, I saw you, sitting under a fig tree, I saw you sitting under, an oak tree or whatever, all of a sudden you go, wow, oh yeah, they looked off, you are truly the Son of God. Jesus does something even deeper. Now, it may have been that Philip was in a location that no one could have seen but God himself. It may have been that Philip encountered an experience while sitting under that fig tree that nobody would have known about except for God himself. And all those things are plausible and possible and probable. But Jesus, again, what he does is what he always does, and he points back to the fulfillment of Scripture. I want you to listen to Zechariah chapter 3. There's this beautiful passage in Zechariah about Joshua the high priest being reclothed. And then after he's reclothed, it's this prophetic writing about what is going to come in the future, the branch, the Messiah, the one who is going to save the entire world. In verse 8 it says, "Behold, on the stone that I have set before your eyes, Joshua, on a single stone with 7 faces, I will engrave its inscription, declares the Lord of hosts. I will remove," listen to this beautiful prophecy, "I will remove the iniquity, I will remove the sin of this land in a single day." Look at verse 10. "In that day, the Lord of hosts declares, every one of you will invite his neighbor to come under his vine and under his fig tree." Jesus is using this play on the prophecy. This true remnant of people are the ones who sit, inviting their neighbors to sit under that fig tree. Now the opposite has happened. Philip has invited his neighbor who has been sitting under the fig tree. And Philip goes, "Wow, you truly are the Son of God. You are the Messiah, the one." And Jesus responds. I love Jesus' response here in John 1. He goes, "Oh, you like that? You think that's cool? What I did there with the fig tree and all that?" Look in John 1 again. In John 1, at the very end of this passage, Jesus says, verse 50, "Because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe me? Truly, truly, I tell you, you will see greater things than these." And he said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven open and the angels of man ascending and descending on the Son of Man." And immediately, all those who were there realized that Jesus did it again, pointing back to the shadows that were always pointing towards him. Does that passage sound familiar? Ascending and descending. How about Genesis chapter 28 with Jacob? Jacob, in Genesis 28, has this dream. We call it the dream of Jacob's ladder. The angels are ascending and descending upon this ladder in this dream. Jacob awakens, and the first thing he says is, truly, God is in this place. So he names it Bethel. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about Bethlehem, Beit Lechem. Beit means house. Lechem means bread, house of bread. Bethel, Bet, house. El is a name of God. The house of God, in that place where you see the angels ascending and descending. And now Jesus says, you thought that was cool. Buckle up, because I'm getting ready to take you on a ride, and what you're going to realize is the same thing that John said about him in chapter 1 of verse 14. The Son of Man, the Word become flesh, is dwelling, is tabernacling among us. The signs and wonders and everything that you're going to see is going to point to the Messiah, the one in whom joins the dwelling place of God with the followers of Christ. You thought that was cool with that fig tree? Buckle up, because what you're about to see is even more awesome. With Jesus, we can say, as Jacob said, truly, God is in this place. I tell you all of that to tell you a story. About a couple weeks ago, when we went up to in December, went up to the mountains. Now, have any of you ever had like a TomTom GPS system before? Not the video game where you hit the cats, but the video game, or not the video, the GPS system. The GPS system, that tells you where to go. Now people don't have TomTom anymore because it's outdated. You had to plug it up to a computer to get it updated, or take it to Best Buy or something. So in Radio Shack, they don't even have those anymore. So now you use your phones. And what's nice about the phones is they recalibrate all the time. They update all the time. But the thing is when you drive through some locations like the mountains, sometimes those GPS systems can lead you in the wrong direction, can't they? We put our trust in these, and we soon find out that our trust is not to be put in the technology that man creates. And so the GPS system will lead you the wrong way, and you have to rely on something else, whether it's instinct for some of you, intuition for some, and then still others you rely upon somebody coming to pick you up when you're lost. And when we're in the mountains, we're driving up through, and this happened to my grandparents as well, but we're driving up through, and it comes to this, the mountains, they do these like loops, 180 loops as you go up the hill. So we're coming up to this 180 loop, and there's all these different offshoots, and the GPS says, in 0.5 miles, please turn right, okay? Well, we get to that area, and there's like 8 rights that you can turn. Which right am I supposed to turn? And so we go to make this U-turn around. Like I said, my grandparents did this too. I had to go down and find them to help them up to the cabin. But we go to this loop to make the turn. And fortunately, Annalena sees this sign, okay, a man-made sign hammered into the ground with a post. And the sign says, "Your GPS is wrong. Keep going straight." And sure enough, it was. So we keep moving straight. And I immediately realized that as good as the technology is, and as good as our attempt is with the phones and the GPS and the TomToms and all that stuff, it just doesn't beat actual road signs. Actual road signs that are put in place to point you to where you need to go. Old reliable, the good old road signs. And so I thought about that, and I thought about all the times, growing up where we would follow those road signs. And of course, you had maps and different things as well, but you ultimately are following the road signs. And if it says, go left for Atlanta, somebody has been that way and has put that there. You go left to go towards Atlanta. Signs are so important to point us in the right direction that we need to go. Now, John is going to talk about 7 signs that occur in his book. He's going to present 7 signs. There's really an 8th miracle that happens with Jesus' own resurrection. But John's going to point to 7 different signs. And in John, the words sign and miracle are just slightly different. You see, you look in the other Gospels, and you see the word sign is used in a negative way. They're asking Jesus for a sign. But in John, a sign is used in a positive way. And here's the difference between a sign and a miracle in John. All right, pay close attention. Here's the difference. A sign is a miracle. But a miracle is not always a sign. Jesus performed some miracles that were just miracles in themselves, and what it pointed to was his authority and power, his ability, his godhood, his godship. That's what it pointed to. But then in John, there are these signs that are miracles that strictly point to who Jesus is and what he's going to do in the near or not too distant future. It's very important for us to understand because the whole thesis of the book of John, you remember John chapter 20, verses 30 and 31? These signs, okay? There are many other signs that Jesus performed, but these Jesus performed in the presence of his disciples. There's no dispute. There were eyewitnesses. These were written so that you may believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Why is that important? John's mentality and his teaching is not that our faith should be built on something that is blind. You've heard the sayings before like, you just got to believe more. You just got to have more faith. Sometimes you'll even hear things like our faith, we have a blind faith. And I understand the intentions behind some of those types of sayings, but the truth is our faith and belief in Jesus Christ is anything but blind. It is built upon the foundation of Jesus and the signs and miracles, authority that he came with and performed while he was here on this earth. And so John writes, so that you may believe, here are these signs that point to Jesus. As we go through this study, let's always keep this in mind. These signs, these miracles, these things that John is writing about are always pointed toward Jesus. That is important because so often when it comes to miracles, we can get so enamored with the elements of the miracle. Can't we? I mean, we'll have days on days discussion about the elements. Well, this is the element that Jesus used, or that's the element that Jesus used. But it's not the element of the miracle that matters. Sometimes we'll even get caught up on the miracle itself. And dare I say, it's not even that which matters. We don't get enamored with the elements or the miracle itself. We get enamored with the one who's performing those miracles, those signs, because they're always pointing to Jesus. So right here in chapter 2, we see the first of Jesus' 7 signs in the book of John. The first of these signs that were written so that you and I and all those who read may believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. And this is one of the coolest signs there ever was. Look here in verse 1 of chapter 2. On the 3rd day, all right, okay, it's already interesting, right? On the 3rd day. Now, some have looked at this and said the 3rd day, well, that's pointing back to the other days that were beforehand, which would show these miracles, these things happening. His first week of ministry happening within 7 days. And that's potential. So maybe it was 3 days later, something like that. But keep in mind with this particular miracle, on the 3rd day is so important because even those words right there are pointing to something else that's going to happen in the future on the 3rd day. On the 3rd day, there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee. The mother of Jesus was there. Jesus also was invited to the wedding with his disciples. When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." So these weddings during the first century, they would typically last 1 to 2 weeks. Could you imagine? Some of our weddings will last maybe a day or a couple more days, but 1 to 2 weeks. And instead of Don't get any ideas of trying to change culture up around here now. But instead of the bride and her family paying for it and footing the bill, the groom did. The groom paid for the entire wedding. But anyways, and so one of the things that was very important to the bridegroom was that they had all the food, all the drink, everything for the entirety of the 1 to 2 weeks as guests came and left. Because if they ever ran out of anything, it was a huge deal. Their reputation would be stained for the rest of their relationship. People would look to them and say, they're the ones who ran out. They're the ones who didn't have enough. They didn't get those memos. It's better to have more than less, that type of situation. So these weddings would last this 1 to 2 weeks long. And they needed to have everything in place to last that long for the guests that were coming. And so they run out of wine. And the mother of Jesus, whatever reason, she felt like it was her part of her responsibility to come up to Jesus and say, hey, you need to help with this. And I want you to listen to Jesus' response, but don't try it at home. Jesus said to her, woman. That's the part you don't try at home. This is in the Greek, however, this is actually not disrespectful or distasteful. It's similar to saying my lady. Kind of like how we use ma'am, my lady. And Jesus says, what does this have to do with you and me? My hour has not yet come. Verse 5, his mother said to the servants. Now, of all things Mary, the mother of Jesus, ever said in the Gospels, this may be the most enlightening and the most important. Look at her words here. Pointing towards the servants, looking at the servants, she says of Jesus, do whatever he tells you. Whatever he tells you. Sometimes we're not going to like what Jesus tells us. Sometimes it won't agree with us. Maybe sometimes we won't agree with it. Sometimes it's tough. It bothers us. It's hard for us to comprehend and understand. Why would he say? We might even think that there's a better way. But Jesus' way is the only way, and it is the best way. And he says, Mary says, do whatever he tells you. So Jesus is going to use this opportunity to perform the first of many signs that's going to point to something extravagant. Jesus, in verse 6, looks and sees there 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servant, fill the jars with water, and they filled them to the brim. And he said to them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast. So they took it. So Jesus, he sees these stone jars. The Jewish people would have these rituals where they would wash their hands in a very particular way so the water would drip from their fingers down their wrists and it would cleanse as it dripped down. And they would use these stone jars because they believed that the stone jars couldn't contract all the disease and illness and impurities of the world. So they would have these stone jars there for the purpose of washing before meals. You might remember other stories about Jesus and the fact that his disciples didn't always wash their hands before meals and different things. He sees these stone jars there that are used specifically for the Jewish rites of purification, and Jesus is going to use those jars, symbols of the Jewish tradition, to turn something to enlighten us. It says it was 20 to 30 gallons each. That's 120 to 180 gallons. That's 1 gallon there. These 6 jars contain 120 to 180 of those. You imagine how much water that is. The story goes on, and the servants take this to their master or to the one who organizes the wedding event, and he tries this water, and immediately he tastes wine. This miracle is so fascinating, John doesn't even tell us when it happens. Was it while they were walking? Was it while the stone jars were sitting there? Was it as he lifted the... We don't know, and it doesn't matter, but he tastes wine, and immediately he's mesmerized because you have saved the best for last. I want you to catch what Scripture says. It says, this individual, the one who the wedding planner, essentially, as he's trying it, he doesn't know from where this wine has come, but the servants do. Here's just a little side lesson for us to take today. Oftentimes, we are people who love to be in the know. If you're like me, I'm very nosy. I always want to know. Maybe the lesson we can take from this is if we want to be in the know, we ought to become servants first. It seems as though servants always know. The servants know from where it becomes. But I want you to notice what the disciples do. Look here in verse 11. This is the first signs Jesus did at Cana in Galilee, and it manifested his glory, and his disciples did what? Believed in him. These were written so that you may believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. The disciples immediately believed. They were already following him. Now they believe in him. But why this miracle? What does it point to? Jesus turning water to wine. Let me ask you a question. What does wine represent in the New Testament, particularly in John? The blood of Christ. And it's really fascinating that Jesus is taking what the Jews used for purification and he replaces it with an emblem that will be used for the purification of our sins. See how cool that is? Now, you think about Jesus upon the cross. The soldiers come to him and take this spear and stab him in the side. And immediately flowing from his side comes water and blood. Jesus all along is pointing to how he's going to replace and renew the old with the best. Believe in the best. Now, I want you to notice as we close this lesson up, Jesus' words at the very end of this chapter, because they're so important for us to understand. Jesus has performed this first of many signs to point to what he's going to accomplish at the crucifixion. Now, what's even more fascinating is Mary, the mother of Jesus, is referenced only 2 times in all this of John, the Gospel of John, only twice. And twice she's referred to as the mother of Jesus, and Jesus twice calls her and says, "Woman, my lady." The first is at the first sign. The second is at the cross. When he says to John, the disciple whom Jesus loved, "Woman," this says to Mary, "Woman," this is John, "behold." Jesus pointing to the future of what he's going to perform for the purpose of our belief not to be built upon blind faith, but upon what has been witnessed, seen, and heard. At the end of John 2, verse 23, when Jesus was in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, many believed in his name when they saw the signs that he was doing. Now, he's there for the Passover feast. He's performing many other signs, many other miracles. John didn't need to mention these, but I want you to notice the response of so many as he's performing these signs. Jesus, on his part, did not entrust... go back a little bit. Now, when he was in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, many believed in his name when they saw the signs he was doing. But Jesus, on his part, did not entrust himself to them because he knew all people and needed no one to bear witness about man, for he himself knew what was in man. This word belief and trust there in the English Standard Version is this play on words in the Greek. Okay? It's a play on words, and really it goes something like this. They saw Jesus' signs, they were impressed, so they believed him, but he didn't believe their belief. That's what John's conveying here. Why here, though? Why does John convey this here? Well, number one, I believe it's because of chapter 3, verse 1. There were many who saw what he was doing and believed, chapter 3, verse 1. Now, there was this one man, Nicodemus, who when Jesus tells Nicodemus what he needs to do in order to inherit the kingdom, Nicodemus doesn't understand. But the other reason I think that John puts this here is to warn the readers. And maybe to remind the readers, especially those who have the book right in front of them, of what he says all the way back in John chapter 20, right before his thesis statement. You remember his thesis was, these signs were performed so that you may believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. But right before this, John quotes Jesus and said, have you believed? By the way, this is the story with who? Thomas. Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. We're in a unique category from the apostles of the first century because not a single one of us is old enough to ever have sat there at the foot of Jesus and physically witnessed with our eyes the signs that he performed. Our belief, though, is still not built upon a blind faith. It's built upon a faith of the evidence that Jesus has left from us. And that faith doesn't come by sight, but from hearing the Word of God. Now, John includes this portion in the end of John chapter 2 about these individuals who believed Jesus because they were really impressed with him, but Jesus didn't believe their belief. To warn all of us to be careful not to become enamored with the elements of the miracle, or even with the miracle itself, but to become enamored with the one who performs the miracle. He's going to tell Nicodemus, unless you are born again, born from above. What does this mean? Born of water and the Spirit. I believe Jesus is pointing forward there to our Christian baptism. Where is the blood found? If you read John chapter 2, you realize it's in the water. John wants us not to become enamored with the miracles or the elements, but with the one who performs the miracles, so that our belief, our faith, is not merely a confession, but it is a daily action, living out for Jesus what he has asked us to live. Where's the blood found? In the water. Where is the cleansing, the providing, the healing, the purifying? In the blood of Jesus Christ. I wonder if anyone will open these doors this morning.